As the sky dimmed and shadows stretched across the quiet street, Jack Harper steered his car slowly into the driveway, the gravel crunching softly beneath his tires. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment staring at the quiet street bathed in warm porch light and drifting barbecue smoke. The evening was peaceful, almost too peaceful. Kids' laughter, a breeze in the trees, all the familiar markers of a typical suburban night. Everything looked the same: trimmed lawns, white mailboxes, creaky porch swings. But Jack couldn't shake the tension coiling in his gut. Something felt off, like a storm was forming behind the calm. He'd learned to trust that instinct. He stepped out and looked at the house. 2 stories, sea-green shutters, neatly kept lawn. It hadn't changed since the day he and Kate first saw it 12 years ago. Back then, it felt like a dream. He remembered her running barefoot through the empty rooms, laughing, planning where the bookshelves and mirrors would go. It felt like home, even before the boxes were unpacked. Jack used to believe that peace like this was permanent. Homemade pies, quiet evenings, Kate humming in the kitchen. After a rough past, he thought he'd earned this stability. But now, as he stood on the porch, something inside him, inside the house, felt different. The stillness didn't comfort him anymore. It unsettled him. He glanced up at the bedroom window. The light was on. Kate was probably home, or maybe not. He couldn't be sure anymore. Jack was in his early 40s, a broad-shouldered man whose military posture hadn't left him. Time had sharpened his features and dusted gray into his hair, but he carried it well. His eyes, cool gray-green, lingered on the upstairs glow. He used to feel grounded here. Lately he felt untethered. He remembered proposing to Kate by the lake, how she cried, laughed, and said yes without hesitation. Back then the future felt wide open, full of love and trust. But lately that feeling had faded. Inside, the hallway was dark. Kate usually left the light on when he came home, not tonight. Maybe she was working late or out with friends. But why hadn't she told him? He flipped the switch. Warm light spilled over the familiar furniture, their wedding photo, the vase of dried lavender. Kate's face beamed from the picture, wrapped around him in her lace dress. Jack kicked off his shoes, staring at the photo. The silence around him felt heavier than usual. Kate had been distant lately. Her stories about work, friends, and daily life had dried up. She no longer shared the little things. Whenever he asked, she'd just say, "I'm fine, just tired." Jack never pushed. He believed in giving space. But something had shifted, and his gut told him it wasn't just exhaustion. He walked into the kitchen and spotted a note stuck to the fridge next to a vacation photo from last summer. In Kate's tidy handwriting, it read, "Going to be late, don't wait for dinner." That was it. No heart, no smiley. No love you, just a sentence. Cold, clinical. Trying to brush it off, Jack poured dog food into Barney's bowl. But the golden retriever didn't come running. Then he remembered. Kate had messaged him that morning. Vet checkup for Barney, then a walk in the park. Now it was almost 9 p.m., and neither of them were home. Jack pictured her walking through the park, maybe talking on the phone. He shook off the image. Jealousy had never been his thing. In 12 years, he'd never doubted her. Kate was charming, beautiful. People noticed her, but Jack trusted her. He was a quiet engineer, more at home in his workshop than at parties. Maybe she once had more exciting men in her life, but she chose him. Still, he couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling. He grabbed a bottle of iced tea and sat down in the living room, flipping open a car magazine. But the words wouldn't stick. The only sound was the clock ticking and his own breathing. No footsteps, no car, no voice. If something were wrong, she'd call, right? He tried to convince himself. Maybe she stopped by her parents. Maybe Sarah invited her over at the last minute. Kate was independent. He admired that. He never wanted to be the guy who checked her every move. But now, staring into the dark window across the street, Jack realized something painful. He had no idea where his wife was, or why she hadn't called. Jack tried her number, straight to voicemail. He stared at the phone, unsure what to say, then hung up. A simple text followed. "You okay? Where are you?" Delivered. No reply. He got up and started pacing. On the bookshelf, a photo album caught his eye. He opened it. Wedding day. Kate glowing. Him stiff in a too-new suit, but smiling like he'd won the lottery. Pages of anniversaries, vacations, moving into this house. A shot of Kate hugging puppy Barney, Jack holding car keys. Their history in snapshots. Now he wondered if any of it still meant anything to her. Last night she'd come home late, claimed she was swamped at work, barely touched dinner. Skipped small talk, went straight to bed, facing the wall. Jack lay awake, trying to convince himself she was just tired. He'd suggested a trip, a break. "Now's not the time," she'd said. "I've got a project. I can't drop everything." But lately, things weren't adding up. A new perfume she wore every day. Shopping bags with clothes he hadn't seen. Her phone, once left on the table unlocked, now glued to her hand, even in the bathroom. One night he woke to find her scrolling under the covers. "Just reading the news," she said. He nodded, but something inside him cracked. Then, a knock. Jack froze. Another knock, soft but certain. He stepped to the door and peeked through the peephole. It was Kate. The porch light lit her face, tired but still striking with that calm, unreadable expression he'd always found both beautiful and infuriating. She wore a wrinkled coat, wind-blown scarf, and ankle boots, light for the weather. Her hair was loose, messy, and behind her, Barney wagged his tail. Jack opened the door. "Kate, you have a key." She blinked, then laughed awkwardly. "Right. I forgot." She walked in. Her scent hit him, a mix of her usual perfume and another cologne, male, unfamiliar. She petted the dog without meeting Jack's eyes. "How was the vet, buddy?" she murmured to Barney. Jack hovered nearby, trying to convince himself he was imagining things. "I called," he said. "Texted. Got worried." "Phone died," she replied quickly. "We took a long walk, ran into Sarah, got talking. Then the vet kept us waiting." Too many excuses. Too many details that didn't quite line up. Sarah lived across town. The vet closed at 7. It was past 9. Still, he said nothing, just nodded. "Glad you're okay." Kate nodded back and headed upstairs. "I'm wiped. Shower in bed, okay?" Jack didn't answer right away. He watched her disappear, then closed and bolted the door behind him. Barney looked up at him, whined softly. "Something's wrong, huh?" Jack whispered, scratching the dog's ears. That night, sleep didn't come. The house felt heavy with silence. Every creak, every noise outside only sharpened the tension in the room. Kate came out of the shower in one of his old t-shirts, her hair in a towel. She climbed into bed, faced the wall, and said nothing. Jack stared at her back. Everything looked the same, her outline in the dark, the room around them, the faint scent of shampoo. But something had gone missing. Something vital. That cologne. The shaky story. The way she avoided his eyes. Kate used to lie well when she needed to, but this wasn't a lie. This was distance, and it scared him more. He thought back. How they'd grown quiet, disconnected, slowly but surely. Short chats. Silent meals, long pauses. Now she was here, but barely. Was this the beginning of the end, the final crack in the life they'd built? Jack didn't know if he should confront her or keep pretending. Instinct told him to wait, watch, and hold on a little longer, even if everything was already slipping away. Jack Harper had always been the quiet, steady type, the man who waited, who stayed calm, but this time something broke. He could no longer ignore the signs. The silence between them wasn't peace anymore. It was denial. And now it was time to face the truth. The morning sun filled the house, but Jack felt nothing but darkness. He woke early, Kate already gone. Her perfume lingered faintly. Downstairs, the smell of coffee pulled him into the kitchen. Kate stood at the stove in a sharp pantsuit, too formal for a casual Friday. She looked startled to see him. "Morning," Jack said. "Hi," she replied, forcing a smile. "Eggs?" He nodded. She made 2 plates. They ate in silence, tension thick between them. Kate fidgeted with her mug, barely touched her food. "You came home late," Jack said carefully. "Busy day," she cut in. "Work's been crazy." "You okay?" "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Deadlines, pressure, new boss." Jack didn't push, but her story felt off. She used to vent about work in detail. Now she gave vague answers, kept her phone close, wore new perfume, bought clothes she didn't mention, and last night she smelled like another man. He suggested a weekend trip, just the 2 of them. She paused. "Can't. Meetings. I need the weekend to prep." "All weekend?" Kate looked away. "It's important." She left in a rush, mumbling, "Love you," then skipped their usual goodbye kiss. Jack sat at the table, staring at his untouched breakfast. She was lying, and doing it badly. He opened his laptop. They shared a phone plan, and Jack pulled up her call log. Most numbers were familiar, but one kept showing up late at night, calls and texts nearly every day. It wasn't local. He searched it, nothing public. Likely a personal cell, possibly his. Jack remembered a name, Rick, a lawyer Kate once mentioned from a conference out of town. A harmless comment at the time. Now it echoed ominously. He stood, breath tight, and opened a window. The cold air didn't help. He needed more than suspicion. He needed proof. The word divorce hit him like a slap. He hadn't allowed himself to think it, until now. Kate had already checked out. He had to be ready. At 10 a.m., Jack grabbed his jacket and drove to the vet clinic. If Kate had been with Barney all evening like she claimed, it would be on record. The receptionist smiled politely. Barney Harper was in yesterday at 6 p.m. Left by 6:40. Everything's fine. Jack forced a smile, thanked her, and stepped back into the sunlight. She was free by 6:40. She didn't get home until 9, almost 3 hours unaccounted for. And now, the truth was catching up. Jack slid into his truck but didn't start the engine. He just sat, fingers tapping the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the betrayal. Kate was lying to him. He felt it in his bones. If she could hide the truth, he had every right to find it. She had claimed her weekend was packed with work, but Jack doubted that. More likely, she was planning to meet him, the mystery man. That gave Jack an idea. He wasn't going to follow her in person. Too risky. Instead, he'd use something smarter. Back home, he dug through old boxes in the attic and found a dusty Android phone he once used for GPS experiments. It still powered on. He activated location tracking and linked it to his Google account. Now, he just needed to plant it in her car. Kate's sedan was parked out front. He slipped outside, grabbed the spare keys from the hallway console, and quietly approached the vehicle. The street was empty. He opened the door and tucked the phone beneath the passenger seat, hidden but with a clear signal. Locked up, walked away. Done. That evening, Kate came home late, said she'd be gone early for a full day of meetings. Jack just nodded. He played it cool, but inside, he was boiling. Saturday morning, she left at 8. Once her car turned the corner, Jack opened the tracking app. The dot moved, but not toward her office. It was headed east, away from the city. Jack watched as the signal stopped hours later, in a remote town at a spa resort. Not work, a weekend getaway. Jack's hands went cold. Still hoping for some innocent explanation, he packed a camera, binoculars, and hit the road. He drove in silence, eyes on the highway, thoughts on loop. How long? How had I missed it? When he arrived, the spa looked exactly like he feared. Secluded, quiet, upscale. He parked far off, keeping his truck hidden behind other cars. Kate's white sedan was already there. Hours passed. He waited. Then, just after 1, they appeared. Kate walked out of the building, glowing, laughing. Her face lit up with the kind of joy he hadn't seen in years. She looked free. Next to her was a man. Tall, confident, designer jacket, sunglasses, carrying a suitcase in one hand, the other wrapped casually around Kate's waist like he'd done it 100 times. They moved like a couple. Talking, touching, lost in their own world. Jack froze, binoculars pressed to his face. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was who Kate became with him. She looked alive, like a version of herself Jack hadn't seen in years. And that hurt more than anything, because now he knew. She hadn't just lied, she had left him long before she ever walked out the door. Jack lowered the binoculars. Kate was laughing, glowing even, the way she used to when she loved him. But that look in her eyes wasn't his anymore. It belonged to someone else. He sat motionless, staring at the hotel where his marriage had just quietly ended. No outburst, no screaming, just the quiet sting of finality. He forced himself into motion. Pulled out the camera. Click, click. Dozens of shots. Kate smiling, brushing her hair behind her ear, kissing the man on the cheek. Holding his hand like it belonged there. Jack captured it all. When they drove off in the man's SUV, probably Rick, Jack stayed hidden. His chest ached, but his head was clear. The pictures were proof. She wasn't just straying, she was gone, emotionally and physically, and she thought he'd never find out. He crouched behind a hedge, staring at the camera screen, each photo twisting the knife deeper. Still, He didn't let rage take over. He had to stay smart. He waited for hours, watched them return, towels slung over their shoulders after the lake. Then they went to dinner, and Jack followed from a distance. From across the street, he zoomed in through the restaurant's front window. More photos, her hand in his, faces lit by candlelight. That familiar smile, the one Jack hadn't seen in years. He didn't confront them. He didn't burst in. He took pictures. Because emotion wouldn't win this. Facts would. By midnight, they returned to the hotel. Jack had everything he needed. He drove home through the dead hours of the night, fighting sleep and waves of nausea. He reached the house just before dawn. It was dark. Kate wouldn't be back until Sunday night. He didn't sleep. Just sat in the living room, haunted by the images he couldn't unsee. No shouting, no breakdown, just clarity. Jack had always been level-headed. Now that quiet resolve turned into a plan. By Monday morning, he was ready to act. He recalled a colleague, Mike, who once mentioned a lawyer that helped him through a nasty divorce. Jack called under the pretense of discussing work, then casually asked for the lawyer's name. Mike didn't ask questions, just gave him the number, Raymond Scott. Jack could barely focus through the morning. At lunch, he left the office and drove downtown. Scott's law office was in a weathered brick building near the courthouse. Jack hesitated before going in. It felt like crossing a point of no return, but then reminded himself the point had already passed. Inside, he was greeted by a calm, professional receptionist and then ushered into a modest office. Raymond Scott was a sharp-eyed man in his 50s with a firm handshake and no time for small talk. "Mike Jenkins sent me," Jack said, voice low. "I need help." Scott nodded. "How bad is it?" Jack took out his phone and camera, showing him the photos. As the lawyer quietly studied them, Jack stared at his own hands, trying not to think about what was in those images. Finally, Scott leaned back. "This is strong. It clearly shows an extramarital relationship. I think she's planning something. She might even file first," Jack said. "Her lover's a lawyer, she told me that." Scott didn't flinch. "If he's directly involved, that's a conflict. But it doesn't mean he won't help her behind the scenes. We'll stay ahead of it." Jack nodded, grateful, but still numb. "I want to be ready," he said. Scott motioned to the folder in Jack's hand. "Let's start with what you brought. Property, finances, anything we can use." Jack slid the documents across the desk. It was time to protect what was his. Jack placed a folder on the lawyer's desk. Bank statements, property estimates, retirement accounts, investments. Most of the mortgage is paid off. We have a joint portfolio and I pulled some screenshots. She's got her own savings too, but I don't know the full picture. "Impressive," said Raymond Scott, flipping through the documents. "You're well organized." "I'm an engineer," Jack said with a forced smile. "Numbers make more sense than this." The lawyer nodded. "Now listen carefully. Don't confront her. Don't mention cheating. Keep calm and act normal. If she feels safe, she might slip up." Jack agreed. "I've been playing it cool." "Good. Keep collecting evidence. Photos, records, anything that proves infidelity. Do you have text messages?" "Just call and SMS logs, no actual messages." "That's fine. Courts can request content if needed, though it's tricky, but the photos you have, they're solid. That might be enough." "Would hiring a private investigator help?" "Possibly, but what you have may already be sufficient," Scott said. Texas considers fault in divorce. Infidelity can impact how property is divided, especially if marital assets were spent on the affair. Jack recalled the hotel and restaurant. "I'll check our credit card statements." "She might have used the joint account." "If so, that's a major advantage. Any prenup?" "No. We were broke when we got married." "Then everything acquired during marriage is on the table. But if we prove she cheated and used joint funds to do it, you may walk away with most of it, including the house. Also, she could lose her claim to alimony." "I paid most of the mortgage from my paycheck," Jack added. "Even better. But be prepared. If she's serious about leaving, she may try to hit back hard. Accusations, financial traps. If it gets ugly, don't react. Stay above reproach." Jack went pale. "She wouldn't accuse me of something like mistreatment, would she?" "You'd be surprised," Scott warned. "Just behave impeccably. No snooping, no illegal access to her accounts. What you've done so far, photos in public, your own account info, is all legal." "Keep it that way." Jack nodded, processing the warning. "Got it. One more thing," Scott said as he stood. Make an inventory of valuables, jewelry, cars, antiques, and keep an eye out. If she starts moving things out or transferring money, document everything. She's always been secretive with money, Jack admitted. She once opened a savings account just for herself. I'll see what I can find without tipping her off. If she files first, call me. If you decide to file, we'll get everything prepped. But sometimes it's better to let her make the first move. It gives us the element of surprise. Jack shook his hand. Thanks, I'll be ready. Back at work, Jack tried to focus, but he was a ghost at his desk. Colleagues asked if he was okay. He waved them off, blaming a rough night. No one could see the storm inside him. That evening, he got home before Kate. With time to spare, he checked the filing cabinet and found an old statement from her personal account. $20,000 2 years ago. He snapped a photo. Then he peeked inside her jewelry box. Everything was still there. Heirloom necklace, diamond earrings, anniversary gifts. At least she hadn't started moving assets. Kate came home a little later. Her footsteps were light, her movements casual, but something in the air had changed. Jack greeted her with a calm smile, one he'd mastered over years of marriage. Dinner was ready, pasta, salad, her old favorite. He poured wine. Everything looked normal, but the tension between them was thick and silent. You cooked? She asked, surprised. Thought you might be tired, he said evenly. Kate hesitated, then sat. She nibbled at her food, quiet, as if choosing her words. Jack studied her movements, the way she tucked her hair, the fork in her hand, her tight jaw. Thank you, she said softly. This is nice. Jack only nodded. If he spoke, he might say too much. The silence between them stretched. No laughter. No talk about the day, just a quiet, simmering truth neither of them voiced. Jack felt its weight, but he wasn't ready to confront it. Not yet. Jack watched as Kate opened her mouth a few times, then hesitated, clearly wrestling with something. Finally, as dinner neared its end, she spoke softly. Jack, we need to talk. He set his fork down. Okay. She avoided his eyes. Lately, I've been thinking about us. Our marriage feels stuck. Like we're roommates, not partners. Her voice trembled, but Jack said nothing. I just think it would be better for both of us if we ended things before it gets worse. You mean divorce? Jack asked. She nodded. Yes. A fresh start for both of us. Jack stayed calm, just as Scott had advised. If that's what you want, I won't stop you. Kate blinked, caught off guard. She'd expected anger. Instead, she got acceptance. I'll start the paperwork, she said. Jack nodded. Let's keep it civil. We don't have kids, just Barney. We'll figure that out. The air between them was thick with unspoken pain. Her eyes landed on a mug she'd used since their first year together. Her hands shook slightly. We tried, Jack said quietly. Kate nodded. I remember every test I took alone so I wouldn't get your hopes up. Every night I cried in the bathroom. I remember how you held me. Her voice cracked, and Jack looked down, remembering the tiny shelf he once built for kids' books, then quietly disassembled. I just got tired of hoping, she said. So did I, Jack whispered. And not everything can be saved by trying harder. For a moment, they shared a silent, mutual sadness, not of anger, but of dreams lost over time. Kate stood and started clearing plates. About the property, Jack stopped her gently. Not now. We'll handle that later. Right, she said, almost in a whisper. I think I'll turn in early. She left. Jack stayed behind, cleaning up, then crashed on the couch downstairs. He didn't sleep much, but he felt a strange sense of calm. The curtain had dropped on Act 1, and he hadn't revealed his hand. The next day, Kate sat at a bistro near her office, nervously stirring her lemonade. She was waiting for Rick, her lover. Her thoughts lingered on the night before. Jack hadn't argued, hadn't asked questions, hadn't even mentioned another man. His reaction left her uneasy. She would have preferred outrage, anything to justify her decision. His calm made her doubt herself. Hey, beautiful, Rick said, sliding into the seat across from her. Sharp suit, confident smile. He was everything Jack wasn't. Well, he asked. Kate hesitated. I told him I was unhappy. Asked for a divorce. He just agreed. Rick raised an eyebrow. No questions? No accusations? No, nothing. He took her hand. Strange. Do you think he suspects? I don't think so. I've been careful, cleared my phone. Jack's never been the spying type. Rick smirked. No husband is, until he is. Kate shook her head. He's just passive. Maybe he's ready to move on too. Did he ask if you're seeing someone? No. Did he sleep in your bed? No. Stayed on the couch. Rick leaned back. Still, don't relax. You need to file first. Take the lead legally. I already called your friend, Sarah Miller, meeting her tomorrow. Perfect. She'll take care of it. Just tell her I sent you. Kate looked down. It's weird. I feel guilty. Jack wasn't a bad man. Rick squeezed her hand. That's in the past. You're building a better future. Kate nodded, though her eyes still held something heavy. Regret, maybe. But she stayed silent. The plan was in motion. Rick leaned back, his tone laced with disdain. He never valued you the way he should have. You felt like a background character in your own life, stuck in suburbia with a guy who was more into tools than your future. Kate hesitated, then nodded. She'd once dreamed of travel, ambition, something more. Jack had been content with routine. Maybe she had settled too soon. You deserve more, Rick continued, stroking her wrist. You wanted to live boldly. With me. And now you can. You're right, she said. I still care about him, but I won't back down. Good, Rick said. Let's talk about what you want in the split. Kate didn't hesitate. The house. I've put too much into it. Property values are rising. It's worth holding on to. Rick nodded. What else? There's around $50,000 in joint savings. Technically, it should be split, but I think I deserve more. I carried a lot of the load while he built his career. My time matters too. Absolutely, Rick said. We'll push for a larger share. What about spousal support? I hadn't thought about it, Kate said. But it would help, especially if I don't get the house. If your income's lower, it's an option, Rick said. Unless Jack finds out about us, then alimony's off the table. He won't, Kate said quickly. I've wiped everything. We're not connected online. I've been careful. Good. And stay that way. No photos, no meetups in public until the divorce is finalized. If he suspects anything, play innocent. Kate nodded, though her expression tightened when Rick brought up finances again. Maybe shift some of the joint funds, just a bit. Make a large purchase. Move money to your account. Then return it later. Kate frowned. Isn't that risky? Rick smiled. Only if you're sloppy. Just don't be obvious. And check if you still have access to the joint account. Download a statement before anything changes. I will, she said. He hasn't filed yet. He might soon. File first. That way, we control the terms. You said he's passive. He won't see it coming. Kate exhaled, then smiled faintly. Tomorrow, I meet with Sarah Miller, your lawyer friend. Perfect. Tell her I sent you. Rick glanced at his watch, kissed her, and whispered, I love you. Kate watched him leave, heart racing. Regret lingered for Jack, but she felt ready. A new life was waiting, and she wasn't going to lose. A week later, Jack pulled a thick envelope from the mailbox. Divorce papers. Inside, legal language spelled out Kate's demands. The house, half the assets, possible alimony. Jack stared at the pages, unsurprised but still stung. She was going all in. He sat at the table and called his lawyer. She filed, Jack said. As expected, Raymond Scott replied. Standard list. Money, house, support. Jack's voice stayed calm, but his grip tightened on the phone. Should we mention her affair now? We'll include it, Scott said. Photos, call logs, everything you've got. We'll introduce it strategically. Jack paused. Part of him wanted to expose everything now. Another part wanted to wait, to let her think she had the upper hand. Let's keep it vague for now, he said. Just note marital misconduct. Details come later. Scott agreed. That wording gives us leverage. When the time's right, we'll hit them hard. Good, Jack said quietly. He ended the call and stared at the blank screen. Kate would soon realize he wasn't clueless, that her careful game had been watched the whole time. And when it came time to fight, Jack would be ready, with every piece of proof lined up and waiting. Jack stood by the window, watching Barney nap on the porch. The house still looked peaceful, but Jack knew better. This was just the quiet before everything unraveled. Once he was sure Kate hadn't come home, he logged into their joint bank account. The balance was lower than expected. A $15,000 transfer had been made to Kate's personal account, disguised as a payment. He took a screenshot and shut the laptop, jaw tight. She was already moving money. trying to reduce the shared assets. Another calculated move. But Jack wasn't the fool she thought. Scott would make sure that money was accounted for in court. That night, when Kate got home, their conversation was brief. She suggested mediation, her lawyer's idea. Jack agreed, knowing it wouldn't go far but wanting to appear cooperative. They were now sleeping in separate rooms, coexisting under the same roof like strangers. Even Barney, confused by the tension, bounced between them. Jack suspected he'd end up keeping the dog. Kate's future likely didn't have room for old attachments. On the day of mediation, they arrived separately. The mediator, a calm older woman, welcomed them into a lavender-scented room. Kate brought her lawyer. Jack came alone, per Scott's advice. Kate spoke first. She wanted the house, half the savings, and short-term spousal support. She framed it as a fair start to her new chapter. Jack kept his tone steady. We bought the house together, but I paid most of the mortgage. I'm fine selling it and splitting the proceeds. Or she can buy out my half. Kate's jaw tightened, but she let him finish. As for savings, split them evenly. And alimony? We're both employed. No kids. I don't see the need. Kate jumped in. I supported him while he built his career. I worked part-time, managed the home. We're the same age, Jack replied coolly. And you've been full-time for 5 years. Making good money, Kate's lawyer whispered in her ear. The mediator offered a compromise. Kate keeps the house, but drops the alimony request. Jack nodded. As long as I get compensated for my share, that's fine. Kate scoffed. So you want to take the house and bleed me dry? I want what's fair. Their eyes locked. For the first time in a while, Jack saw something uncertain in her expression. He always had control over the finances, she muttered to the mediator. Now he wants me out. The mediator suggested a pause. Kate's lawyer agreed. They'd reconvene later. Outside, as the lawyer stepped away, Kate turned to Jack. I didn't expect this from you. What? Standing up for myself? You used to go along with everything. Now suddenly, you're all sharp edges. I'm just protecting what's mine. You wanted a civilized split. I'm offering one. You know I don't have the money to buy you out, she snapped. So you're forcing me to sell. If that's the case, yes, Kate glared. I thought you were better than this. I see I was wrong. She walked off, calling over her shoulder. See you in court. Jack watched her walk away, her final words hanging in the air like a warning. If that was how she wanted it, then he knew what to expect. A courtroom battle. But fear no longer lived in him. Over the past few weeks, something had changed. The image of the quiet, passive husband had peeled away like old paint. What remained was someone sharper, steadier, a Jack who wouldn't roll over. When the trial day came, he stood in front of the mirror for a moment. His dark gray suit, worn only for weddings and job interviews, now hung a little looser. He'd lost weight. Stress had stolen his appetite. But his reflection was composed. The softness in his expression was gone, replaced by someone leaner, older, more resolved. Shadows under his eyes told their own story. Still, his stare was focused. Running a hand through his cropped hair, he exhaled. Barney brushed against his leg, sensing the tension. Wish me luck, buddy, Jack murmured, giving him a gentle pat. The dog lowered his head as if he understood. The courtroom smelled like aged wood and paperwork. Jack took a seat beside his attorney, Raymond Scott, who gave a small nod without looking up from his files. Organized, prepared, and unreadable behind wire-rimmed glasses. Moments later, Kate entered, her lawyer in tow. She was polished in an expensive green suit, hair immaculate, posture rigid. But Jack noticed the pale cast to her face beneath the makeup. She didn't look at him. Rick was there too, seated quietly at the back of the room. Sharp suit, smug expression, as if waiting for his prize to be handed over. Jack clenched his jaw, then turned toward the judge. Judge Henson, silver-haired and serious, opened the case. Harper versus Harper. Kate's lawyer spoke first, delivering a smooth narrative. The marriage, she claimed, had run its course. Her client had done her best to preserve it, but it had dissolved over time. Divorce, she said, was mutual. She stressed Kate's contribution to the household, framed her as the support system behind Jack's career. No direct blame, but a clear undertone that Jack hadn't met his wife's emotional needs. Jack sat quietly, expression neutral. Just once, he looked over at Kate, but she wouldn't meet his gaze. Was it guilt or fear? Then Scott stood. His voice was clear, confident. He cut right to the point. This isn't just a story of growing apart. This is about betrayal. This marriage ended because of the wife's affair. The courtroom went still. The judge arched a brow. Kate's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Rick stiffened in his seat, half rising, then sank back. Kate's attorney looked blindsided. Scott continued without pause, handing a folder to the judge's assistant. These are photographs documenting an ongoing extramarital relationship. Jack knew exactly what the folder held. Images from the spa, Kate in Rick's arms, holding hands, kissing, proof. The judge looked up. This affair began before divorce proceedings? That's correct, Your Honor, Scott replied. The assistant passed copies to the bench and opposing counsel. Kate opened the folder and visibly paled. Her face flushed with color, then drained. Her lawyer's jaw tensed as she flipped through the evidence, clearly unaware these photos existed. Mrs. Harper, the judge said sternly, do you or your counsel have a response? Kate stood abruptly. Your Honor, we don't know how these were obtained. This may be a violation. I took them, Jack interjected, standing. His face was hot, but his voice was steady. In a public place. That's my wife in the pictures and her companion. Mr. Harper, please, the judge said, raising a hand. Let your attorney speak on your behalf. Jack sat down. His outburst had slipped out, but he felt a strange relief. The lie was out in the open now. Kate buried her face in her hands, whispering something to her attorney, who nodded before addressing the court. My client admits to a relationship, but insists it began after the marriage had already collapsed. They had emotionally separated before any physical involvement. Jack flinched but held his tongue. Scott didn't. With respect, Your Honor, he said. The divorce petition was filed a month ago. These photos are dated 6 months back. This relationship began well before any legal separation. He turned toward Kate. She said nothing. Her lawyer hesitated. The couple may have been struggling prior, but infidelity is still infidelity, Scott cut in. And in Texas, adultery is grounds for fault-based divorce. The judge raised his hand again. We've heard enough. Mrs. Harper will have her chance to testify. Let's proceed for now. Mr. Scott, anything else? Scott nodded slightly, but didn't speak. The damage was done. Kate sat frozen, her head bowed, hands clenched in her lap. Her attorney busied herself with documents, clearly rattled. Rick, now quiet and uneasy, remained on the back bench, suddenly stripped of his usual smugness. The room felt heavy. But despite the exhaustion settling deep in Jack's bones, a quiet, solid sense of relief took hold. The secret he'd carried was no longer his alone. Scott straightened a few papers, then addressed the judge with unwavering calm. Your Honor, we also have documentation indicating that Mrs. Harper attempted to move a significant portion of the couple's shared funds into her personal account without Mr. Harper's knowledge or consent. He handed the folder to the clerk, who brought it to the bench. This bank statement reflects a transfer of approximately $15,000 just days before the divorce was filed. The purpose? Disguised under vague notes suggesting intent to shelter funds from equitable division. The judge frowned and turned toward Kate. Mrs. Harper, is this accurate? Kate hesitated, then murmured, That money? It was from my personal savings. No, Your Honor, Scott cut in. It was deposited into a shared account, then swiftly moved under her sole name. This kind of behavior, moving marital funds to private holdings right before filing, is unfortunately not uncommon in contested divorces. Kate flushed. I was going to use it for some renovations, she said, but her tone lacked conviction. The judge leaned back, rubbing his temples. I see. So here's what we're looking at. He turned to Kate, voice calm but stern. Mrs. Harper, your claim was presented as a mutual, respectful separation. Yet the court sees evidence of both infidelity and attempts to conceal marital assets. Under those circumstances, your request for spousal support seems, at best, misguided. Counselor? Kate's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client has contributed greatly to this marriage. He motioned for her to sit. That will be considered. Thank you. Then he looked to Jack. Mr. Harper, are you requesting any additional compensation, emotional damages? Legal restitution? Jack slowly stood. No, sir, I just want an honest split and to move on with my life. There was a faint tremor in his voice, but what he said couldn't have been more true. He wasn't here to drag things out. No revenge, no drawn-out fights, just closure. The judge nodded and turned to his notes, then began to deliver his ruling. Jack held his breath as the decision unfolded. Kate grew visibly paler with every word. The marriage was formally dissolved. The house was to be sold unless Jack opted to pay Kate her 30% share, allowing him to retain ownership. The asset split wasn't even. Based on Jack's larger financial contribution and the court's acknowledgement of Kate's misconduct, the division would favor him, 70% to Jack, 30% to Kate. As for the $15,000 she had transferred, it would be deducted from her portion, considered already received. Spousal support was denied outright. Kate's income was deemed sufficient, and the judge cited cause for the breakdown of marriage as a factor. Both parties were to pay their own attorney fees. Jack exhaled slowly. It was more than fair. It was a clear win, legally, morally, and emotionally. Across the room, Kate looked stunned. Her hand gripped the edge of the table. She hadn't just lost the case. She'd lost control of the story she tried to script. 30% and no alimony, far from what she had counted on. The judge gave a final glance to both sides. Let's try to settle the remaining steps civilly. Court is adjourned. The gavel's crack echoed like a door closing. Jack stood. Raymond Scott extended his hand with a quiet, "Congratulations, Mr. Harper. Not every day justice comes through this clearly." Jack gave a small nod. He felt something like breath coming back to him. He gathered the documents, tucking them into the folder, and scanned the courtroom one last time. Kate hadn't moved. Her lawyer leaned in, speaking softly, but Kate just stared ahead, unblinking. Rick was gone, slipped out sometime after the ruling like smoke in the wind. Jack wasn't surprised. When things got uncomfortable, men like Rick vanished. He had no doubt Rick would be miles away before Kate even left the building. Scott walked off to speak briefly with the judge before heading out. They would finalize the paperwork in the coming days. Jack lingered. He couldn't leave it like this. After all those years, through happiness, routine, loneliness, disappointment, there had to be something more than just silence to end it. He needed to say goodbye, not with bitterness, but with something real. He approached quietly. Kate was sitting near the window now, hunched as if weighed down by everything she'd refused to see until today. When she looked up, their eyes met for the first time in weeks. Her face trembled, tears rimmed her lashes. She tried to keep her composure, but the mask cracked. They stared at each other for a moment, two people who had shared a life. There was so much between them that no court could account for. The looks, the laughter, the dinners in silence. The dreams left behind. The love that faded quietly, and the betrayal that didn't. "You set this up," Kate choked out, her voice hoarse. "You followed me, watched me. You waited." Jack didn't flinch. "I protected myself," he replied, his voice low. "You just didn't expect me to." Kate's expression twisted. Grief, rage, shame all crashing at once. But Jack didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. "You wanted to blindside me," he said, quietly, cleanly. "But I wouldn't let you burn my life down without a fight." Kate sat slumped, her hands shielding her face, shoulders trembling. Gone was the confident woman who had once taken control. In her place was someone grappling with the fallout of her own choices. "I didn't think it'd end like this," she whispered through her tears. "This isn't what I imagined." "No one ever thinks it will," Jack replied quietly. "No one walks down the aisle expecting it to fall apart." He sighed deeply. "I didn't want to fight. I loved you. I wanted to fix things, but not at the cost of my self-respect. You may not have meant to do what you did. Not all at once, but you made your decision." Silence stretched between them. When Kate finally lifted her head, her face was streaked with tears, her eyes rimmed with red. She looked hollowed out. But beneath that broken exterior was something painfully real, a kind of stripped-down honesty that came too late. "So now what?" she asked bitterly. "Are you satisfied? You held your ground, claimed your victory." "Is that what this was about?" Jack didn't answer right away. His expression was calm, but behind it a weariness lingered in his eyes. "There's no winning here, Kate. We both lost. The only thing I did right was not losing myself. I hate that it turned out like this. I really do. Not just for you, for us. We had something once, and we kept pretending everything was fine long after it stopped being true." Kate wiped her nose. Her guard was down now, no more defenses left to hold. "You were always the better one," she whispered. "And I was stupid." Then the tears returned, raw, unguarded, and painfully human. She cried openly, without shame. and Jack could see the sorrow was real. Grief, not guilt. Not a tactic, not a plea. Just mourning something precious that was gone. And for a brief moment, something long buried stirred in him. A flicker of the man who used to greet her at the door with a smile, who brought her soup when she had the flu, who once whispered dreams of a family. That warmth was still there, but with no home to settle into now. He reached out and gently rested his hand on her shoulder, a light, familiar touch. "We'll get through this," he said softly. "Not together, but we'll get through it. You wanted a new life. Now's your chance. Just don't build it on lies this time. Be honest, with yourself and everyone else." She looked up, her expression full of sorrow, and maybe something else. Gratitude, perhaps. Then she gently pulled away, not harshly, just carefully, like someone still learning to stand on uncertain legs. Wiping her eyes with a crumpled napkin, she looked at him again. Her face, for the first time in a long time, carried the weight of understanding. "Goodbye, Jack," she murmured. He nodded. There was no resentment in his voice, only a quiet strength. "Goodbye, Kate." Jack turned and walked toward the door, her uneven breathing behind him. He grabbed his keys, opened the door, and paused on the threshold. He inhaled the familiar scent of the home they'd built together. Then, without another glance back, he stepped out. As the door clicked shut behind him, something inside him released, like air slowly escaping a sealed jar. It was final, but it was also freeing. A week later, the house sat still and empty. Jack had chosen to keep it, covering Kate's share as awarded by the court. He didn't want to sell the place where so many memories, good and bad, had taken root. Despite everything, the house still mattered. Kate had moved out swiftly, taking only her essentials: clothes, personal keepsakes, a few framed photos. She left behind most of the furniture and houseware, perhaps too emotionally weighed down to take more. Their shared history seemed just as heavy for her as it did for him. Now the rooms felt both familiar and foreign. Their old bedroom upstairs was empty, the bed stripped bare. Jack continued sleeping downstairs in the guest room. He wasn't ready to face the emptiness of that space just yet. One warm evening, Jack sat out on the porch, a cold beer in hand. Barney lay beside him, head resting in Jack's lap. The summer breeze carried the scent of cut grass. A neighbor across the street pushed a mower, and for a moment Jack could have been living in a simpler time. He gazed at the horizon where the sunset had spilled golden pink across the sky. His life had turned inside out. Just a few months earlier, he was a regular guy. A husband, a homeowner, a man with routines. Now? Divorced. The word still felt foreign, like a label that didn't quite fit. Barney shifted slightly, letting out a low sigh. Jack smiled faintly and scratched behind his ears. "We made it, huh?" he said. The dog glanced up, eyes full of trust. The feeling that filled Jack's chest was tangled, a mix of relief and aching loss. No more pretending, no more dodging the truth. The storm had passed, but in the calm after there was wreckage. He had lost the woman he once adored. The trust that glued their life together was gone, and even though he'd done nothing wrong, the aftermath still stung. He placed the bottle beside him and rubbed his face with both hands. During the whole ordeal, he'd been too focused, too restrained. Now that it was over, the emotion crept in. He closed his eyes. Memories began surfacing. Kate running barefoot in her wedding dress on the beach during their honeymoon, choosing Barney together from a litter, laughing over champagne in their tiny kitchen after she got her first paycheck. The tears came quietly. No sobs, no drama, just a steady stream. Jack sat there, eyes wet, petting Barney, watching the sun dissolve into the distance. He cried for the betrayal, for the lost time, for the love that couldn't survive, and for the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Barney whined softly and licked his hand. "It's okay, boy," Jack whispered, voice cracking. "I just needed to let it out." As the last tears fell, so too did the final traces of bitterness. What was left was emptiness, but not despair. It was more like an open space waiting to be filled. When the sun finally dipped below the rooftops, Jack stood. A new idea had formed, quiet but sure. Tomorrow, he'd repaint the living room, rearrange the furniture, nothing drastic, just something to mark a new chapter, and maybe take a short trip, just him and Barney. Maybe to that lakeside cabin they'd once visited long ago when things were still good. Everything had shifted, and Jack Harper wasn't about to fade away. If he, a quiet and unassuming engineer, had managed to endure betrayal and dishonesty, then solitude wouldn't break him either. The gate clanged shut behind him. Jack glanced back and saw Mrs. Randolph, his elderly neighbor, waving warmly from her porch. "Evening, Jack. How are you holding up? My husband and I baked a pie. Want me to bring you a slice?" For the first time in what felt like forever, Jack gave a real smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Randolph. That's very thoughtful. I'll stop by later." "Come on, dear. Don't be shy," she added with a wink, clearly pleased to see his smile again. Naturally, the neighborhood already knew what had happened. Suburban gossip spread fast. But Jack hadn't felt judged, only supported. Back on his porch, he let his eyes drift across the dimming street. Ordinary people in ordinary homes carrying their own joys and burdens. He was one of them now. No better, no worse. Just someone who had been through the fire and stayed standing. "Let's go, Barney," he murmured to his retriever. "There's work to do." He tapped his leg and Barney sprang up, tail wagging. Jack glanced up at the sky where the first stars had begun to twinkle. Something stirred inside him. Quiet, tentative hope. He didn't pretend the future would be easy. There would be lonely nights, difficult memories. But something solid had awakened in him, and it wasn't going away. Maybe, just maybe, after the storms, happiness would return, earned and real. He stepped through the doorway, and the soft glow of the hallway greeted a different Jack Harper, the one who'd walked through betrayal and come out whole. Almost a year passed. Jack eased into his new chapter, not lonely, just living alone. His days followed a peaceful rhythm: work, time in his garage, long walks with Barney, quiet evenings with a book. He renovated the bedroom, painted the living room, built a new porch. It was a fresh start, clean and his own. Holidays still stung sometimes. Certain memories surfaced unexpectedly, but they no longer cut deep. They simply lingered with a gentle sadness. The past had its place, but no longer weighed him down. Then Lily appeared. They met at the library. Barney had tugged toward the door, whining. Out walked a woman with reddish hair, crow's feet from smiling, and an armful of books. She scratched Barney's ears and smiled at Jack, and that was the beginning. No awkwardness, no effort, just easy. She taught literature at the nearby college and had recently moved to town. She didn't pretend or try too hard. Jack noticed that immediately. She was grounded. And in that calm, something warm flickered. Coffee dates turned into long walks. Walks into dinners. She laughed at his bad jokes, baked old family recipes, and once shared a rainy truck bed picnic when plans fell through. She never poked at his past, but listened when he was ready. Jack didn't expect to fall in love again. But one morning, as Lily tied her scarf before a trip to the farmer's market, he realized he feared losing her. That meant only one thing. 15 months after the divorce, Jack stood on the shore of the same lake where he'd once proposed to Kate. In his hand, a simple white gold ring with a small stone. Lily didn't like flashy things. Barney, older now but still sprightly, lay nearby. In Jack's other hand was a thermos of coffee. He waited as Lily stepped out of the car. They'd planned a casual morning picnic, just like that first one. No, life wasn't what it had been, but Jack was ready to begin again. Lily approached, adjusting her scarf against the breeze. "Why'd we come out here?" He handed her a coffee and said quietly, "Because it was here I once thought I deserved happiness, and now I know I was right, just had the timing wrong." She gave him a curious look. Jack knelt down, opened a small velvet box, and held it out. "Lily, you've been the best part of my life since the worst part ended. I'm not asking you to fix me. You already have. I just want to be beside you, always. Will you marry me?" Leaves rustled in the wind, and Barney gave a soft bark as if encouraging them. Lily's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes sparkling. "Yes, Jack." Of course, yes. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Jack Harper didn't just feel alive. He felt completely, deeply happy.